Professor Soare, thank you very much for joining our interview series. Let me start right away with the first question. In your two articles on Romania for two ECPS reports in 2023 and 2024, you argue that the country was once considered a partial exception to the global diffusion of populism. However, in 2020, radical right populist parties made a notable return to the parliament. What factors do you believe have driven this resurgence of radical right populist parties in Romanian politics?
Thank you for your question, and thank you for this interview in general. Well, there are different reasons. To start with, Romania has a tradition of populist mobilization in post-communist politics, and this is something that we have to take into account. In particular in the 90s and early 2000s, different political parties echoed a populist platform with relevance in terms of electoral success. What happened in 2020 mirrors, on the one side, a circumscribed event which is connected to the pandemics, the malaise that was felt by different citizens. However, it also testifies something that has to be said. Somehow crossed the political arena from the very beginning of the transition to democracy. The fact that the change in terms of political regime did not have diffused economic benefits, and I think this is quite important. It means that there are huge portions of Romanians that do not see themselves on the winning side of the transition to democracy, and then starting with 2007, the status of EU membership. This explains also why Romania has the highest level of Romanian citizens living abroad. For the most part, a group of citizens that were pushed by the impossibility of having a decent living standard in Romania, or for a tiny minority, the acknowledgement of their training and high, I would say, high competencies in terms of the job market. There is a nice article published today on Politico, which somehow illustrates these huge gaps in Romania that are connected with education, economy, and also, I would say, the huge difference between Bucharest and the rest of the country, and in general between the main cities and the rest of the country. So what happened in 2020 is that we had the perfect combination: a context of malaise driven by the pandemic, a very skilled political entrepreneur, Georgescu, and of course, something that has to be mentioned from the very beginning: AUR is not what can be considered a personal party. AUR translates also different strands of mobilization on the ground, of association experiences that supported and somehow maintained a stable support for AUR over time since 2020. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you. How do you interpret the rise of far-right parties like AUR and SOS Romania in the context of Romania's political landscape? What specific societal or political factors have contributed to their increasing influence? What role do you think Romanian national identity and Euroscepticism play in shaping the populist rhetoric of parties like AUR and SOS Romania, particularly in their emphasis on sovereignty and traditional values?
Thank you for your question, a very relevant question covering different aspects. So AUR and SOS come from the same, I would say, nucleus, from the same origins, considering the fact that the SOS leadership is represented by Diana Șoșoacă. She used to be an MP elected on our list in 2020. So there is somehow an alignment between AUR and SOS. However, the difference in my view is particularly linked to the type of party organization. As I said, AUR is a rooted party. It has social roots connected to different experiences of association and militancy on the ground. On the other side, SOS is more like a personal party, echoing the vocal presence and the visibility of the leader. However, they both share somehow an emphasis on the need to defend the national identity. This is, however, not something very, I would say, connected or exclusively connected with themselves. In the current presidential election, and in particular on the day of the first round of the presidential election, I think that symbols are also relevant. For example, the candidate that nowadays is, I mean, in this moment is presented as the pro-European liberal and progressive candidate, also was dressed in a way she somehow echoes that there is a diffuse nationalism and somehow also, I would say, religious dimension across political parties. She was dressed extremely, I mean, she's a very beautiful woman, very well dressed, but she had a tiny bracelet with the Romanian flag, and she wore the tiny bracelet at her hand, and then she also had a huge cross at her neck. These are also elements that identify that it's not that this SOS party and AUR are so different in terms of echoing the need of defending traditions and religion in Romania. This is something that crosses the entire political spectrum. They do it in a more vocal way, and they also do it with a higher intensity. I would say that according to standards that are quite common in the academia, while AUR looks increasingly like a radical right party with an attempt to control the populist side of his discourse, so increasingly so looking, I would say, mainstream in the way some of the position of the stances of the political parties are expressed in public discourses. On the other side, SOS echoes a lot of extremism, because it definitely goes beyond the boundaries of the constitutional lines, in particular, for example, echoing a lot of anti-Semitism, which is, of course, one of the basic clashes with the democratic constitutional pillars. Going back to your question, what about European Union? Well, once again, there is also, while in the other parties, the mainstream parties, vocal criticism against EU are somehow refrained by their belonging to the establishment, their being party of government, belonging to European parliamentary groups that are considered to be mainstream. It's easier for these parties in the opposition to be vocal. With the exception of SOS, which is a little bit more ambiguous on the position of EU, I do not think, and I haven't been able to trace, both with interviews with party leadership, party leaders, party candidates in the European elections, and party programs, raw exit position when it comes to AUR. This is definitely not the case. As I said, this has been mentioned by SOS. Why this is not the case? Because in the case of AUR, what they say is that there has to be a compatibility, a synergy between what Romanians want and what the European Union ask Romania to do. And for example, they show that in particular on the moral aspects, they say, well, we shouldn't be obliged, for example, to accept certain norms like the acceptance of the LGBTQI community. But once again, you would be surprised to see that this is a common position that somehow crosses all the other parties. So it's not so peculiar about them. It's just that they voice it in a stronger way, also because they are outside of the political options of parties with a real potential to become party in government. What I want to say with this is that there is in Romania, and somehow this explains also the results of the first round of the presidential election in 2024, there is a diffuse nationalism and skepticism with regard to certain aspects connected with the European Union that are more rooted and not so concentrated as one might expect. They are diffused in the society, diffused in the across the political parties, and they have been channeled quite easily in the 2024 presidential election by a candidate which presented himself as not being part of the establishment, an outsider. So I think this allows us to make a bridge with more recent events.
Right. How do you interpret the shift in focus from ethnic-based exclusion to cultural and religious-based exclusion among Romania's radical right populist parties, and what factors might have driven this transformation?
Thank you for your question. Well, in the most recent fieldwork that I have done, I somehow understood a little bit better the origins and the organization of AUR, and in particular the fact that while in the early phases of the research with Claudiu Tufiș in particular, we noticed two main roots, one connected with the prevalence of the emphasis on the need to restore the great Romania, and in particular the union with the Republic of Moldova, and on the other side another pillar connected with conservative values that somehow go even deeper in the history of Romania and in the so-called fascist period in I say fascist because in the term it's so-called is because the term would be legionary movement between the two world wars. I mean, beyond these two roots, there is a third root, in particularly connected with the area of Transylvania, where a group of militants shared the need to defend the cultural integrity, and in particular, they opposed the Hungarian minority as a threat for the territorial integrity of Romania. So it is important to say that there is somehow in our position which clashes with the issue of ethnic minority integration in Romania, and also this explains why Viktor Orban was so vocal when AUR joined the ECR group in after the 2024 EP elections. However, this message is not central in the Romanian political arena. What it is prevalently defended by this party as well as by SOS is the need to control the cultural and the moral identity of the Romanian people. Why it is so? From the interviews that I had with both militants, simple member voters, and also part of the candidates for the EP election, the explanation is quite simple. There is a diffuse frustration that the process of European integration and the process of globalization represent a threat for the survival of the Romanian the Romanian nation, in the sense that on the one side there are values that are not coherent with the religious tradition in Romania, for example, a fluid understanding of gender. On the other side, there is also always there an economic frustration. The fact that we are what these parties echo, the perception of Romania being a colony of other countries, so obliged to import norms and values that are not aligned with the tradition. But you might tell me, why is it so? Well, they see it as a risk in the long run, not only in a risk in the short term. Just to give you an example, Romania, as I told you in the first question, experiences one of the most intense flow of migrants, economic migrants from Romania to Eastern Europe. So there is a shrinking, I would say, of the population. So there is a decrease in the population. And this, what AUR and SOS say, is that we have to pay attention not only to the fact that these people go abroad, and some of them are among the most skilled Romanians, so we lose part of the intelligentsia, but also that we lose our strengths, demographic strengths. And what they say also indirectly is that somehow there is a risk of diminishing the relevance of the Romanian majority in Romania with other communities. The Roma community is not targeted, but I have the hint that other communities are seen as a potential threat. Hungarians, probably they are not explicit on that, but they see it as a vulnerability in the long run, like a threat to the Romanian people with less and less individuals in Romania. This also explains why they have and how they justify a very traditional role for women in society. They see women as part of this of their project of securing the reproduction of the Romanian people in the long run, not only as part of the tradition, but also as a strategic investment in the reproduction of the Romanian people in the long run.
How changes in Romania's party registration laws in 2015 created an opportunity for the proliferation of new political parties? To what extent do you believe these changes reflect a broader trend in post-communist democracies? How sustainable are these new parties in the long term?
I mean, Romania has been criticized in particular by different NGOs acting in the field of advocacy for democracy and monitoring of the quality of democracy, for having had one of the most rigid law for party regulation, with a threshold of initially 10,000 and 25,000 members for a party registration, with different other criteria of territorial diffusion and so on. And what was the by-effect of this regulation that was born in the 90s and then amended in the early 2000s? Well, at the beginning, the aim was to limit the fragmentation in the political arena, so to increase the governability. However, what these NGOs said, and different experts, academics also, is that there was also a negative effect. The negative effect was that it was very difficult for new parties to organize themselves. So there was a limited potential of renewal in the party system. The Romanian party system was defined by the literature as a relatively closed party system, with the positive elements in terms of predictability and stability, but also as an artificially closed party system, in the sense that it was closed because there was a cartel of parties that through legal regulation with regard to party laws, party funding, and also electoral funding, like, for example, a high level of signature required for candidacies and so on, a cartel of parties that controlled implicitly, or not only the parties in parliament, but also the competition in the election, limiting the voice of the people. when the law changed, this change, so the diminishment of the threshold for registration to 3 members, which has been equated to the number of members required for an NGO to be organized. So I would say symbolically, political parties have been associated to a genuine representation of the civil society. Things have changed. There has been an increase in party in the creation of political parties, and we have seen once again with Claudiu Tufiș in a nice article, at least in my view. I'm definitely biased. What we've seen was that even before 2020, there was an area of radicalism in the extra parliamentary offer of political parties that showed that a demand for representation. So I think that the change in the law facilitated the development of this offer of radical parties in Romania. For example, now in the perspective of the legislative election to be organized on the 1st of December, there are different other parties associated with former members of MPs of AUR that are somehow seen as potential surprises, like the party of the young people, which is also supposed to be one of the parties that endorsed the candidacy of this surprising candidate that arrived first in the first round of the election in 2024. So the law definitely helped the diffusion of these kind of parties. But the law did not create these parties. These parties multiplied because there was something on the ground, not only entrepreneurs, but also a diffused need of representation of this level of frustration. And I think this is the case across Eastern Europe. And probably the best comparison would be to see how the political party system changed in Bulgaria, not only in terms of sequence of elections, but also of the change and fragmentation, in particular on this dimension. So the Bulgarian party system also saw different new radical right populist parties that have multiplied and somehow mirroring the same level of frustration that can be identified among the Romanian electorate.
How has the Alliance for the Union of Romanians managed to capitalize on economic and social anxieties to expand its political influence despite its controversial ties and radical rhetoric?
Well, I think that one of the elements that I forgot to mention in the previous question, but I will use it as the starting point in answering to this question, is that while the law facilitated the proliferation of parties, some of these parties are well developed in terms of organizational infrastructure, and AUR is part of this. So how AUR succeeded in voicing these anxieties, I think is quite simple. First of all, through his origins, in particular at the diaspora level, what we chronicled, what we observed in the research with Claudiu Tufiș was that there were a lot of militants already active in providing social services to Romanians in Romania, somehow channeling part of their well-being in the Western countries in order to help their families, relatives, but also in general the community of Romanian that are in need in Romania. So they channeled, I think, these frustrations, in particular by showing that they care, because by recruiting and by providing networks, connections with these active people in formal and informal associations at the diaspora level, they showed that they were credible. They showed that there was something more than a simple political entrepreneur that voiced where I'm going to take care of your frustration, anxieties, and so on. He was credible because these networks of increased his credibility. And Simeon himself was seen as a credible because he was part of this network, in particular with regard to different projects of union with the Republic of Moldova. So I think that while SOS party voices and uses in a very, I would say, fluid way, really through a very skilled political representative, which is Mrs. Socio-Economic. In the case of AUR, the capacity to voice these anxieties are linked to this network. So the difference is stability and organizational pervasiveness on the side with regard to AUR, and on the other side a lot of skill communication.
What role has the Romanian diaspora played in shaping the electoral success of populist parties like AUR, particularly in the light of their strategic targeting of diaspora voters?
Thank you for your question. Well, this is one of the most intensive field of research in my on my research agenda. So I feel quite comfortable in answering to this question. Well, we know that diaspora started to matter in political terms, becoming I would say a political art able to alter the direction of the competition and the results of the competition at the national level, in particular since 2009 presidential election. So diaspora, it's not has not been become active only with our diaspora became active over time, in particular starting with 2008, when a change in the electoral law foreseen reserved seats in parliament. So there was a stake for political parties to start mobilizing this diaspora. Of course, when we are talking about diaspora, we are talking about a multi-layered and multi-sectors community. Why multi-layered? Because, of course, there is a temporal layer. There are different flows of migrants, those that started their migration trajectory before the fall of the Berlin Wall, those that starting their trajectory in the early 90s, 2000, and so on. So the level of also of integration in the communities of residents varies according to their to this chronological trajectory. There is also a lot of difference in terms of I would say professional trajectory. Some of them went from Romania to highly skilled jobs, and others to less skilled jobs. Some of them exchanged forms of exploitation in Romania with really tough exploitation in certain areas. In particular, in southern Sicily, there has been quite a lot of I would say reporting of how Romanian community of has been exploited in by Italian agricultural entrepreneurs. And this has triggered, to be honest, a lot of mechanisms from the Romanian state to defend this Romanian migrants. So my diaspora is very heterogeneous. Why these people felt mobilized by our SOS, but I would dare say also by another party, a very credible party, very liberal party like the USR. Well, they have been I would say, mobilized by, in particular, by parties that present themselves through origins, age, because they are new parties, origins because they have connections with the diaspora, or simply because they are new and vocal, and particularly vocal on an anti-establishment platform. So they have been mobilized by parties that have been seen as different with regard to the traditional offer of political parties, in particular the Social Democrats and the Liberals. So diaspora voted on a regular basis, not only on the content that definitely plays a role, but also on the idea that we need politicians able to be different from the traditional post-communist elite, and in particular politicians able to dismantle the cartel of parties, to dismantle the level of corruption. And what is regular in my interviews and somehow clashes with the ideas that I see in the Romanian media on a regular basis is that most of the people that I had the chance to interview told me that they voted also because they want to secure a future for themselves in Romania. So the idea is that they invest in these parties because they think, they feel confident that these parties can increase the quality of the life in Romania, and also of the democracy, because these people are not extremists. To the extent of my knowledge, the people I had the opportunity to interview, none of them spoke about, for example, a change of regime, or, for example, of anti-democratic position. No, what they care about was an increased level of transparency, and so a diminished level of corruption, and increase living standards in Romania in order to be able to go back. And this is, I think, something important.
Right. Although far-right independent candidate Calin Georgescu was not seen as a serious candidate in almost all the polls, he won the first round of presidential elections, which was dubbed as shocking by many European experts. What are the key factors behind the unprecedented surge in support of Georgescu, particularly given his low polling numbers before the election? Do you agree with the characterization of his victory as shocking?
Yes, definitely shocking. Shocking on different, with different, I would say, on different levels. First of all, shocking because it has, as you have rightly said it, it hasn't been seen by the different analyses published before the elections, somehow foreseeing a runoff between the candidate endorsed by the Social Democrats, and on the second position there was a tight fight, according to the surveys, between the candidate of the USR and the AUR candidate. So this candidate came apparently out of nowhere. It was not very well known. However, he was there. He has been in politics for quite long. Those familiar with Romanian politics and those who are familiar with the different moments of governmental instability know that his name was mentioned on different occasions, starting from 2011, if I'm not mistaken, then 2015, as one of the names published in the media as a possible prime minister, a technocratic prime minister. So it's not possible to say that he came out of nowhere. Last but not least, he was presented as a potential prime minister endorsed by AUR after the 2020 elections. However, AUR detached from Calin Georgescu because of what have been seen in the Romanian media as very problematic. A very problematic interview in which Calin Georgescu expressed the public support for two very controversial figures in the Romanian history, all of them connected with the anti-democratic, I would say, experience between the two wars, the legendary leader and a marshal that aligned, took part to to the war with the Nazis in Russia. So extremely problematic, and he had a law. He was accused and followed by the courts on this aspect. Not very clear what the outcome of this legal scrutiny has been. However, so he's not a candidate that came out of nowhere. He was also quite active in terms of books published and participation also in different associations, echoing themes that might seem very simple, very basic, easy to understand, but somehow themes that, in my humble opinion, are a direct continuation with what we have already seen in the 90s and even before, themes that echo a very I would say rough, not very very subtle form of nationalism. Romanian as an extraordinary people, Romanians as an extraordinary civilization. For example, in one of his interviews, he said that the Proto-Romanian is the basis of Latin, which of course is a little bit, I would say, problematic. I'm not an expert on this issue, but I mean, according to the common wisdom, Latin comes first and then Romanian. But he nevertheless is able to defend this kind of positions in the media. He, for example, he says that there hasn't been a lot of conspiracy theories. There hasn't been a man working on moon. There has even the what happened on September 11th in the States is more. I mean, he challenges the terrorist attack and said that it was somehow orchestrated from within. So he uses a lot of these conspiracies, but aligning with elements that are very very diffused among common people. And this is extraordinary because I think we forgot what populism is about. Populism is about talking about like the people, but somehow showing a messianic position, showing an extraordinary skills. And he's brilliant in that. He voices what people says, and on the other side, he does it with a very reassuring tone of voice. He's very smart. He uses a very good quality of Romanian. I mean, he's definitely a very well-educated Romanian. He definitely has the attributes of what the literature might identify as a savior. Savior, because, for example, there are TikToks showing him on a horse with a Romanian shirt. I mean, trying to on a white horse. I mean, he's definitely the savior, or he's epitomized as a wolf with fire coming from his eyes or his mouth, trying to able to clean and to secure the area. Well, right. Why he succeeded? Well, there are. I mean, the first element is the fact that he was an outsider. He was not supported by a party. He had a message easy to grasp. He was credible because he's clean, he's nice looking, he speaks well. So he was he's not vocal as Simeon. Simeon speaks a more a rougher Romanian, while he speaks a posh Romanian. So it was credible and reassuring. But probably what explains the most his success is definitely a very successful campaign on TikTok, which is under scrutiny.
I would just ask that, Professor Soare. How do you interpret the role of social media, particularly platforms like TikTok, in mobilizing voter support for far-right candidates in Romania? Does this signal a broader trend in European politics?
Well, I wouldn't say about TikTok at a European level, but definitely TikTok has been challenged and has been used by different candidates, not only in Romania, at the European level, in the States. So TikTok is definitely efficient. Why? Because you have small messages, there is not a lot of space of interaction, but there is, however, space of engagement. And I think it's very visual. It's very easy to understand why a huge portion, or a huge relevant portion in the success of Georgescu comes from young people who are particularly familiar with TikTok, and also with the fact that TikTok has been less under the scrutiny of the legal organization that were in charge with monitoring the transparency of the campaign. So TikTok was very efficient, and as you know, there has been also opposition in the European Parliament. There is a problem with the fact that TikTok argues that it's does not allow political campaigns or political forms of engagement, or we can see it in this case that there are at least loops, vulnerabilities in the system that allow for gray areas of mobilizations.
Right.
So
And
this is a
lastly,
threat at the European level and beyond.
right. Lastly, Professor Soare, what chance do you give to Calin Georgescu in the second round of presidential elections that will be held on December the 8th? If elected, how efficient will he be in challenging EU and NATO's positions on Ukraine? Given Georgescu's pro-Russia stance and criticism of NATO, what might his potential presidency mean for Romania's foreign policy, especially its role as a NATO member and supporter of Ukraine?
Thank you for your question. Well, the chances are difficult to be weighted at the moment. There has been quite a wide endorsement, and there is a burgeoning cordon sanitaire among the mainstream political parties. However, still with a missing relevant point, the Social Democrats, and this is quite easy to understand because we have very strategic elections, legislative elections in between the two rounds of the presidential elections. So we have on the 1st of December legislative election, and the next week on the 8th of December we have the second round of the elections. So parties might not be so willing to create this public endorsement for Lasconi in this at this level, because they might jeopardize their chances in the legislative election. And this is a huge risk because Romania is a semi-presidential republic that on the one side means that if the legislative elections were able to secure power in seats for pro-European and mainstream parties, also in particular pro-European and mainstream parties able to build a coalition, because it's very difficult to imagine a single-party government. Well, in this case, I think that everything is under control, because in a semi-presidential regime with the rulings of the Constitutional Court over the last decades, the power of the presidents have been, I would say, circumscribed. However, of course, there is a risk if we consider that in the first round of the presidential election, the radical right candidates, including Georgescu, have scored around 37, if I'm not mistaken, percentage of the vote. So it means that there is a potential also in this election for AUR and SOS to score well. And with these tiny parties connected to the AUR galaxy, in particular, the party of the young people, a party that I told you is identified as one of the parties that was more active as a supporter of Georgescu's candidacy in the first round of the presidential elections. So these parties can obtain a relevant power in seats in the next parliament. So I think that everything depends on the capacity of having in one scenario a cohabitation. Georgescu wins the presidential election, but it is controlled by the government and the parliament, a scenario similar to what we have in Poland. Or a second scenario would be an alignment between this pro-European coalition and a success for Lasconi, for the most part connected with to an increased mobilization in terms of participation. which seems to be a credible scenario. However, there is also a huge risk, and it is currently a quite relevant risk for the second round. The fact that Georgescu will be seen as a victim, a potential target of the mainstream, and the mobilization that is foreseen for the second round will not be there as an award for the pro-European candidate Lasconi, but will endorse Georgescu as a president. And this is even more credible if we consider the fact that there is at the moment complaint to the Constitutional Court for illegal activities, in particular linked to Georgescu's campaign on TikTok, asking to cancel the first round of the election. And it is seen as a very dangerous move and the very dangerous position of the Constitutional Court, because it might provoke an increase of sympathy for Georgescu and for those who might have a very anti-establishment position, a justification to express their vote for Georgescu. But if Georgescu wins, I think that there are also a lot of chances to maintain the European route, let's call it like that.
Professor Soare, thank you so very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.